In this segment, we're going to be taking a look at minority involvement in World War II. How did minorities contribute to the Allied victory? World War II solidified the nation's role as a global power, and it also ushered in social changes and established reform agendas that would preoccupy public discourse in the United States for the remainder of the 20th century. We know that African Americans were still seeking equality. African Americans and others struggled to obtain desegregation of the armed forces and end discriminatory hiring practices on the home front. Women are going to enter into previously male job roles. After all, these roles are going to open up as the men went off to war. Women are going to join the armed forces as well. Though not in combat, they will join the armed forces in support roles. When it comes to minority participation, we find that the minorities participated on a large scale, but mostly in segregated military units. Most were assigned to non-combat roles, that is to say, only assisting in the backup stages. They demanded their right to serve in combat rather than simply support roles. They felt that they wanted the glory of the battle, that they needed the respect on the battlefield to get the same respect on the home front. When it comes to our all-minority units, we must pay attention to the Tuskegee Airmen. These were African-American airmen who served in Europe with distinction. We also need to consider the Nisei. These are regiments of Japanese Americans. They earned high numbers of decorations. They served in segregated units and were restricted to fighting only in Europe. Many felt the need to prove that they were loyal citizens of the United States as opposed to loyal to the Empire of Japan. The Navajo Code Talkers were the third group that we want to talk about here. They had a communication code that was impossible for the Japanese to break. That super secret code was simply their native language. These men could talk in their native language, which was never written down, and the Japanese were left completely befuddled. No idea what these guys were talking about. We cannot put a number on the lives that the Navajo saved during the Pacific conflict, but we certainly know without them, we would have been in a world of hurt. Additional contributions come from Mexican Americans who fought in non-segregated units. Women joined all the branches of the armed forces to support their country. But the cost of the contribution was significant. As African American soldiers fought in segregated units, we do find that these minority units suffered higher casualties than their white counterparts. Units and individuals won numerous citations in a greater ratio than their white counterparts, as they won medals for bravery in action. But participation in World War II reflected the social conditions of the United States. Much like the Jim Crow laws in the South, we find Jim Crow laws in the United States military. As these men tasted a little bit of equality when they were in places like England and France and in Germany, as they were treated with respect as Americans according to the color of their uniform rather than the color of their skin, when these guys came home, it was time to demand a little change. And experiences in war would help usher in a new civil rights movement that is going to take America by storm in the 1950s and 1960s.